Genesis 49, 50, and Matthew 18. In Genesis 49, these are the last two chapters in Genesis. Jacob gathers his son and offers blessings and prophecies over each other, reflecting their individual traits. And this emphasizes the unfolding of God's covenant promise through the tribes of Israel. So Israel had 12 sons, and it seems like for the most part, 12 kingdoms or villages unfolded from them. And Judah is highlighted as a leader of the ancestor of kings, while Joseph is described as fruitful and resilient. In Genesis 50, Jacob dies. Joseph mourns deeply and leads a grand procession to bury him in Canaan, fulfilling his father's wishes. Joseph reassures his brothers who fear retribution for their past actions, affirming that God will use their evil intentions for good to save many lives. The chapter concludes with Joseph's death and his faith in God's promise to bring Israel to the promised land. I think I remember, was it Jacob or after Jacob's death? Yeah, Joseph asked Pharaoh if he could go bury Jacob, and Pharaoh was like, "Yes, you can," and gave him all sorts of provisions, and it was this big ceremony where Pharaoh approved. I thought it was just interesting how Pharaoh approved it. Like he almost approved it in a symbolic gesture because Pharaoh knew that Joseph was blessed. So, and Joseph's basically running the show because Pharaoh knows anything Joseph touches like turns to gold. So, to ask Pharaoh if he can go bury his father, I mean, Joseph could have just gone. Joseph could almost just go do it at this point. It seems like. So I could just see Pharaoh sort of like creating this build up where he's symbolically letting him go, even though he almost doesn't really have too much control. His control over Joseph's almost symbolic, so he does it. It's almost like he's tooting his own horn a little bit. Um, but what can you expect? I mean, it's Pharaoh, so um, Pharaoh sends him out. They bury Jacob, and what else happened here? I think the brothers, I think Joseph's brothers fear that even though it seems like their family situation has resolved itself, I think that they still think that Joseph's extremely powerful and might turn on him. Um, the chapter concludes with Joseph's death and his faith in God's promise to bring Israel to the promised land. Matthew 18, Jesus teaches the importance of humility, symbolized by becoming like little children. He warns against causing others to stumble and emphasizes the value of seeking the lost, as shown in the parable of the lost sheep. This chapter also addresses conflict resolution within the community and underscores forgiveness, illustrated by the parable of the unforgiving servant, urging believers to forgive as God forgives. So I'll flip to Matthew 18. Let's see what else might have happened there. 19. Parable of the lost sheep. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. They're the servant thing. So a servant owed his master money. His master forgave him that debt. But right after he forgave him that debt, that servant had someone under him or adjacent or lateral to him that owed him money. And after having pressure from his servant breathing down his neck for the payment, even though before the servant ultimately forgave him that, but this other servant went out and he did not forgive the person who owed him money. And he wrestled him on the ground, was like strangling him because he's probably thinking like, I almost just got killed for a debt that I owed, so I'm going to do the same thing for you, and bypassed and forgot the part about him being forgiven. So the servant, the highest up servant, found this out. The other workers told the highest up servant that this happened, and he went and found that servant and put him in debtor's jail, which is where you have to stay until you can repay your debts, which is tough because you're in jail and you probably can't work. So hopefully, lesson learned there.